They packed my bags while I was at church. On Christmas night, my husband and the woman he'd been seeing for a few weeks stood in my living room and told me to leave. No coat, no car. Just me, standing in the snow, watching them close the door on a house they didn't even know belonged to me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand everything I gave to that marriage before you understand everything I took back. If you're watching this right now, tell me where you're tuning in from, because what I'm about to share with you, I still have moments where I sit and ask myself, did that really happen to me? This isn't just a story about a cheating husband. Plenty of us have lived that story in one way or another. This is a story about what happens when a woman who has spent her whole life building quietly in the background finally decides to stop being quiet. Stay with me to the end, because 2 weeks after they threw me out into the cold like I was nothing, they were the ones standing on a porch begging. Subscribe now, because trust me, you don't want to miss how this ends. I was 26 when I met the man who would become my husband. He had this way about him, warm, funny, the kind of confidence that fills up a room without trying too hard. He made me laugh within the first 10 minutes of meeting him, and by the end of that night, I already knew I wanted to know him better. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, and I remember standing in my kitchen after he asked, just staring at the ring, thinking, this is it. This is the person I'm going to build a whole life with, and build we did. In those early years, I worked 2 jobs while he finished up his degree. I told myself it was temporary, that once he found his footing, things would even out and it would be my turn to rest a little. I believed that with my whole heart. I packed his lunches, I typed up his resumes, I sat with him the night before every job interview and helped him rehearse his answers. I wasn't just his wife, I was his foundation. When we finally saved enough to buy our first home, I remember sitting at the closing table and something in me, maybe it was my mother's voice in the back of my head, made me ask for the deed to be put solely in my name. He didn't argue. At the time, it wasn't about distrust, it was practical. My credit was stronger, my job was more stable, and honestly, it just made the paperwork easier. Neither of us thought much of it beyond that moment. I certainly never imagined that one decision, made so casually at a closing table over a decade ago, would end up being the very thing that saved me. For years, our life together looked good from the outside. I climbed steadily in my career. He found his own success eventually, too. We hosted family for holidays, we took anniversary trips, we built the kind of life people compliment you on at dinner parties. And underneath all of it, I was still the one holding the structure together. I paid attention to which bills were due when. I remembered his mother's birthday every single year. I made sure our home ran like a well-oiled machine, quietly, without complaint, because that's what I thought a good wife did. I thought if I gave enough, loved enough, worked hard enough, it would always be enough to keep us steady. I want to be honest with you. There were small things over the years, little moments that in hindsight probably should have made me pause. A defensiveness when I asked simple questions, a tendency to compare me to other women in ways that felt just slightly unkind. But I brushed all of it aside, because after so many years together, you build a certain kind of trust, and that trust makes you generous with your interpretation of things. You give the benefit of the doubt because you've earned the right to expect honesty in return. At least that's what I believed. The shift happened fast, faster than I think anyone expects betrayal to happen. It started at a work conference he attended just a few weeks before that Christmas. He came home and mentioned a woman he'd met there in passing, said she was sharp, easy to talk to, someone who apparently had good insight on a project he was working on. I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? Coworkers mention coworkers all the time. It's normal, it's nothing. But within days, not months, just days, I started noticing little shifts in him. He started staying later at the office, which wasn't like him. His phone, which used to sit face up on the counter while he cooked dinner, started staying face down, and then eventually it started coming into the bathroom with him. Small things. The kind of things that on their own mean nothing, but together start to paint a picture you don't want to see. I remember one night, half joking, I asked him who kept texting him so much. He laughed it off, said it was just work stuff, stress from a project. I believed him. After more than a decade of marriage, you don't expect the person lying next to you every night to be capable of looking you in the eye and lying to your face. But he was. What I didn't understand at the time, what I only understood weeks later, once everything had already come crashing down, was that the woman from that conference had moved fast, deliberately fast. She found out quickly that he had a stable job, a nice home, a comfortable life. And she made an assumption a lot of people make when they see a married man who seems to have it all together. She assumed everything sitting inside that house belonged to him. She had no idea the deed had my name on it. She had no idea that the comfort she saw, the stability she was drawn to, had been built by my hands, my late nights, my sacrifices. She saw an opportunity, a man who seemed to have everything, and a wife she assumed she could quietly push out of the picture. And she moved on that assumption without hesitation. Within just a few weeks of that first conversation at the conference, things had escalated far beyond anything I could have imagined. I started noticing a perfume on his jacket that wasn't mine. I found a restaurant receipt in his coat pocket for a place I'd never been to, dated for a Tuesday night he told me he was working late. Small pieces of evidence stacking up quietly, the kind of thing you almost don't want to fully acknowledge because acknowledging it means your whole world is about to change. Then came Christmas Eve. Like every year, I went to church that night. It's tradition in my family, something I've done since I was a little girl, and something I looked forward to every year of my adult life too. He told me he wasn't feeling well, said he'd rather stay home and rest. I kissed him on the forehead, told him I'd bring him back a plate from my sister's afterward, and I left. I remember sitting in that pew, thanking God for my health, my family, my home, completely unaware that my entire life was about to be dismantled in the hours ahead. I pulled into the driveway a little after 10 that night, and immediately something felt wrong. The porch light was on, but dimmer than usual, like someone had adjusted it without thinking. There was a car parked out front that I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped before I even opened the front door, some instinct kicking in that told me something in my home had changed. I walked in and there she was, sitting on my couch in my living room like she belonged there. And he was standing right next to her, not even flinching, not even trying to hide the fact that I had just walked in on something I was never supposed to see, at least not like this. My suitcases were already packed and sitting by the front door. I stood there frozen for a moment, my brain trying to process what my eyes were showing me. He finally looked at me and said, calm as anything, that things weren't working between us anymore, and that it would be best if I went and stayed somewhere else for a while. I actually let out a small laugh because it felt like some kind of cruel joke. But his face didn't change, he wasn't joking, and then she spoke, sitting there comfortable like she had already moved into my life. She said it was probably better this way for everyone, in my house. Wearing my slippers, the ones I kept by the fireplace for cold nights just like that one. I asked him directly, are you really doing this to me on Christmas night of all nights? He looked away. He didn't have an answer for me, which somehow felt worse than if he had said something cruel. I found myself standing outside my own front door minutes later, holding two suitcases, no coat, snow beginning to fall around me, completely unsure of where to go or what to do next. I called my sister with hands shaking so badly I could barely hold onto the phone. She picked up before the first ring even finished and told me to stay right where I was, that she was coming immediately. She arrived 20 minutes later, and the moment I got into her car, I broke down completely. 15 years, gone in one single night, and I sat in that passenger seat crying so hard I couldn't even form full sentences to explain what had just happened to me. That night was the lowest point of my entire life. I want to be honest about that, because I think it's important for anyone watching this who might be at their own lowest point right now to know that it is possible to come back from a moment like that. But in that car on that night, I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that everything I thought I had built was gone in an instant. The first few days at my sister's house are honestly a blur. I barely ate, I barely slept. I kept replaying that scene over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of how a marriage that lasted 15 years could unravel completely in one single conversation, with two suitcases already packed and waiting by the door before I even walked in. My sister didn't push me to talk. She just let me exist in my grief, brought me tea I didn't drink, sat with me in silence when I couldn't find words, and I fell apart for about 3 days straight. Then on the fourth morning, I woke up and something in me had shifted. I remember lying there in my sister's guest room, staring at the ceiling, and a single thought rose up clearly through all the fog of grief. He didn't build that house, I did. Every mortgage payment, every renovation, every extra shift I picked up to cover costs when things got tight, that was me. That house existed because of my labor, my sacrifice, my name on a piece of paper signed over a decade ago at a closing table. So I picked up the phone and called a lawyer. I sat across from her and explained everything calmly, methodically, the way you do when you've cried out every ounce of emotion you have left and all that remains is clarity. I told her about the affair, about being thrown out with no warning on Christmas night, and most importantly, I told her the deed to that house was solely in my name and had been since the day we bought it. She looked at me and told me plainly, you have every legal right to remove him from that property, and you can do it immediately. Exactly 1 week after I was thrown out into the snow, I filed a property seizure order. Legally speaking, he had no claim to that house whatsoever. He had been living in it illegally in a home that was never his to give away to anyone, let alone a woman he had known for only a matter of weeks. But that wasn't where it ended. While gathering documents to prepare my case, going through old bank statements and files, I found something else, something that turned my stomach in an entirely different way. There were transfers, money moved out of our joint accounts, sums I had never approved or even known about, trips, gifts. Expenses that had nothing to do with our household, quietly funneled out over the past several weeks to fund a relationship I hadn't even known existed until it was already blowing up my entire life. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had been stealing from our shared finances to do it. That wasn't just a broken marriage anymore. That was fraud, plain and simple. I handed every document, every statement, every piece of evidence over to my lawyer, and from there it went to the authorities. Within days, there was a warrant out for his arrest. I got the call on a Tuesday morning. He had been arrested right there at the house, my house in front of her. Police arrived with the property seizure order in hand and escorted them both out of a home neither of them had any legal right to occupy anymore. Everything he thought he had won that Christmas night, the comfort, the fresh start, the new life he was apparently building with her, came crashing down in a single afternoon. News like that doesn't stay quiet for long, especially in smaller circles. His employer found out about the fraud charges within the week, and he lost his position almost immediately after. People who used to call themselves our mutual friends started reaching out to me instead of him, some of them awkwardly apologizing for not seeing it sooner, others simply checking in to make sure I was okay. Family members who had once made excuses for him online or in group chats went quiet, and then slowly apologetic. As for her, the woman who had sat so comfortably on my couch that Christmas night, wearing my slippers like she'd already claimed her spot in that house, she learned the truth fast. She learned that the home she had been so eager to help him take from me was never his to give in the first place. She learned that everything she thought she was stepping into, comfort, stability, a paid-off mortgage, had actually belonged to the very woman she had helped push out into the snow. The moment that reality set in, she was gone. Within days of his arrest, she left him standing there with no house, no job, and a court date hanging over his head, completely alone. Turns out she was never after him specifically. She was after what she believed he had. And when she found out he had nothing that was truly his, she disappeared just as quickly as she had shown up. 2 weeks after that Christmas night, there was a knock on my sister's front door. It was him. He looked like a different person standing there, tired. Thinner somehow, even in such a short time. Desperate in a way I had never seen him look before, not once in 15 years. He asked if we could talk, and I stood in the doorway with my arms crossed and let him speak, because I wanted to hear with my own ears what he thought there was left to say. He apologized over and over, the words tumbling out of him almost frantically. He told me it was the biggest mistake of his entire life, that the whole thing had been foolish, a few weeks of poor judgment that had cost him absolutely everything he had ever built. He begged me to consider dropping the charges. He told me he had nowhere left to go, no job, no home, nothing remaining of the life he used to have. I let him finish completely before I said a single word, and when I finally spoke, my voice came out steadier than I expected it to. I told him he didn't lose everything because of one mistake. He lost everything because he made a choice, a clear, deliberate choice in my house on Christmas night, while my suitcases sat packed and waiting by the door before I had even walked through it. I told him there was no version of this story where I simply forgot that, where I pretended the pain of standing outside my own front door in the snow, with nowhere to go, could just be erased by an apology delivered 2 weeks too late. He cried right there on the porch, in a way I don't think I had ever actually seen him cry before, not even at his own father's funeral. But I had already cried enough for the both of us. Back on the night I sat in my sister's car with nothing left to give, I wasn't going to hand him any more of my tears. I told him I hoped he figured his life out, and then I closed the door gently but completely. Looking back on everything now, I don't regret the 15 years I gave to that marriage. I loved fully, I built diligently, and I don't believe there is any shame in giving your whole heart to something, even when it eventually falls apart. But I also don't regret the moment I decided that enough truly was enough. That Christmas night broke something in me that I'm not sure will ever fully heal, but it also freed something in me that had been quietly waiting for years to finally stand up for itself. Sometimes the worst thing another person does to you ends up becoming the very thing that saves you. Being thrown out into the snow with nothing forced me to remember exactly who I was and exactly what I had built with my own two hands, long before he ever walked into my life. My name was on that house long before his was in my life, and in the end, that single decision, made so casually all those years ago, was the thing that gave me back everything he tried to take. If you've ever lived through something like this, or if you're living through something like it right now, I want you to hear me clearly. Your strength is still there, even in the moments you're absolutely certain it isn't. Protect what belongs to you. Know your worth without needing anyone else to confirm it for you, and never, ever be afraid to stand firmly on your own name. If this story moved you in any way, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories just like this one, and drop a comment telling me which part hit you the hardest. And if you know someone in your life who needs to hear this message today, go ahead and share it with them. You never know whose life you might change with one simple share. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.